King Solomon is remembered as the wisest person in history, yet he died in profound despair, convinced that everything he built was ultimately meaningless. Following the death of King David, Solomon secured the throne by systematically identifying and executing every political rival who stood in his way. With his position stable, he began a massive accumulation of hard power. He assembled thousands of chariots, a standing army of horsemen, and a fleet of ships to dominate regional trade. Solomon held total military and political control. This extreme concentration of power creates an immediate and immense pressure on a new leader's character, often leading to rapid institutional rot. Early in his reign, God spoke to Solomon in a dream and offered him a literal blank check. He could have anything he wanted. Solomon bypassed the typical requests for more power, more money, or the heads of his remaining enemies. He asked only for a listening heart and the wisdom to rule his people according to the law. Because his request was selfless, he was granted unparalleled wisdom, along with the wealth and influence he chose not to ask for. By prioritizing the needs of his subjects over his own prestige, Solomon established a service-oriented mission. This foundation of humility provided the blueprint for his early success. Solomon's court became a global destination. People traveled across nations to seek his help with complex disputes and administrative puzzles. One day, 2 women arrived claiming to be the mother of the same infant. There were no witnesses and no physical evidence, creating a complete judicial stalemate. Solomon ordered a guard to draw a sword and cut the living child in 2, so each woman could take home half. Solomon used the sword as a psychological stress test to force an honest reaction. The true mother would sacrifice her claim to save the child's life, while the liar would accept the destructive compromise. This demonstrated extreme administrative agility, using psychology to uncover facts. To grow the empire, Solomon had to address a scalability problem. He couldn't personally judge every micro-dispute in the kingdom forever. He began delegating authority by founding schools for politics and law, training a pipeline of scholars to handle the kingdom's legal and administrative workload. With the daily operations delegated, he focused on massive infrastructure. He spent 7 years supervising the construction of a grand temple, managed by elite craftsmen from across the region. He also turned his court into a scientific hub, gathering scholars from many lands to debate law and advance studies in botany, zoology, and astronomy. This era marked the peak of his reign. He transitioned from an individual problem solver to an architect of self-sustaining systems that could outlast his direct supervision. The byproduct of Solomon's systems, unprecedented wealth, luxury, and peace, eventually became his primary obsession. Solomon's later years were defined by mission drift. His early humility was replaced by pride, leading to self-indulgence and the active endorsement of idol worship. His intellect remained, but he began using it to justify his own vanity and rule-breaking. Because he placed himself above the laws he once championed, the systems of justice he built began to fail, poisoned by his own unaccountable authority. By the end of his life, Solomon fell into a deep despair, viewing his entire legacy as a hollow pursuit. This cycle is the Solomon trap. Early success leads to unchecked authority, triggering a loss of accountability and institutional collapse. Past success is no permanent shield. Without external checks, judgment degrades. To survive, leaders must enforce personal accountability and invite the criticism their power silences. Brilliance is a tool, but it is entirely useless if the person wielding it cannot govern their own ego.